Good morning and welcome to Resilient You with Alicia Pozsony. On our show, we have guests that talk about topics of resilience. And today we're blessed to have a special guest with us. Her name is Anastasia Elliott. Anastasia she's an artist and a musician. She has a lot of greatness to put out into the world. Anastasia, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, and we're happy to have you. Resilient You is put out on Power 98.5 FM satellite radio. We broadcast in over 30 countries out of Manchester, United Kingdom, as well as New York, here in the U.S. And our listeners vary from ages and ranges, but music is one of the things that we love to bring, especially in all the top talent that we put out there. And you're an emerging artist. How long have you been in the music industry?
A very, very, very long time. I started playing music. Started classical piano training when I was 4 and opera training when I was 9. And then I guess around when I moved to Nashville when I was 16. I left high school my junior year and moved here. And I started writing my album and traveling and just kind of piecing together what will now be the project that's about to come out. So this album has been 10 years in the making, and it's really wild that it's about to be birthed into the world. But
amazing.
It's been a long time.
Nashville, what a great place to be. It's such roots from a long time back. And so now 10 years. So your new album is out. No, it's coming out.
It's coming out.
Okay.
It's coming out. We are going to announce the date very soon, but it will be out in the next few months. It's soon. It's coming.
Wonderful. So your album, La Petite Mort, is that?
La Petite Mort, yes. I love how I made an album. I don't speak French, and I sing in French, but speaking French is very difficult. So I made an album name that I have trouble pronouncing, but I love the meaning of it so much. So.
And now what is the meaning of that name?
It translates to the little death, and in French, actually, the direct translation is also orgasm. And so the album goes through all of the different topics of personal deaths and resurrections in our lives, and also orgasms, the lows and the highs.
Right. Okay. Now, I want to touch on something that's personal. I know our listeners can learn from the guests on the show, and you've been through so many challenges. I know that you've done talks on trauma, healing, and art. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about this album, everything that happened during the album? And I know your music is a blend of rock and pop and with powerful vocals. And so until the album comes out, how can listeners kind of go through the journey with you?
Yeah, this album was birthed out of my plane crash that I was in 2013. I had actually written the first song on the album, Crash Landing, before I was in the crash landing. And so I always say I manifested a plane crash and then I wrote an album about it. But I was on my way to finish the song when I was in the plane crash at LaGuardia. And that experience changed my life forever. I was 18 when it happened, and it very much kind of killed the invincible 18-year-old self that you have, where it's like nothing can happen to you, and you're kind of in that phase of life where you're just like, taking life as it comes, but you can do anything, and the immortality is not really something that crosses your mind a lot. I mean, for some it may be, but for me it wasn't. And that near brush with death definitely changed my life in so many ways. I started reading again. I'd never really liked books, and I started averaging like 65 books a year, and I never liked being outside before that, and then was like Miss Garden Queen. And it just made me connect with people differently and write differently and just experience the world differently. But before I was in that plane crash, I grew up in a very, a more like polished socialite kind of society in Houston. And it was a lot of fakeness. And I didn't really grow up with the emotional toolkit to be able to process or handle an experience like that. And so when that happened to me and I was just like sent reeling and I had no clue what to do, I was just trying to pretend like everything was fine. And it really sent me on my healing journey. And I did just about every healing modality you possibly could find, from mediums to hypnosis to Reiki to all different kinds of talk therapies and brainwave stuff, like anything I could to try to understand what was happening and change it and harness it and make it worth something. I think that was always the biggest thing that was important to me, was to figure out how I could like harness the dark things that I was going through and transform them into something beautiful. And that became the album, in the process of making the album. And my name means resurrection. So the whole concept of death and resurrection has always been really close to me. So when putting this album together, I was basically writing it through all of those phases of trauma healing and getting to a better place. And so it's a story album and it's a visual album. It's the music videos all tie together, and it's meant to be listened to from top to bottom if you can. And it's meant to kind of take you along all the different parts of that journey, creation of the album.
Yeah. So the plane crash, did you have physical injury as well as emotional trauma from that?
The whiplash from a plane crash is like times 10 a car crash. It's amazing the amount of force that it produces. So I wound up having like pretty bad nerve pain down my arms and my neck and arms for like a good 3-4 months. But I mean, I was very lucky to not have anything worse than that. So I can't really complain about the nerve pain. Acupuncture fixed that right up.
Good. Well, that's one thing that's on your side. Now, the emotional, when you said that you didn't have the emotional tools to deal with an event like that, and in this world, many of us are in that, whether it's just on our socials, we're using filters, or we're doing things to show that we are good and we're fine. And that is a very important topic that a lot of people don't even realize, that they don't have the tools that they would need to deal with something. In your recovery and being able to use this creative place to get to that point where you were able to harness this and process, did you have any tools that you can recognize now, looking back, that you've been able to add to your emotional toolkit going forward in life?
Absolutely. I think it's not the most glamorous answer, but the number one thing that I think I've taken with me is that mental health and healing is not something that you can achieve. It's something that's always moving, kind of like the tides. Like some days are worse than others. Some flights for me now are worse than others. And it's never that it's going to be like 100% fine. It's just about having things that I know I can rely on. And a lot of them, like I have my top tier kind of things like meditation. And when I'm actually flying, things like knitting, like moving meditation really helps me. So I've found like knitting on planes and things that engage my brain but are not overstimulating. I do a lot of meditation though, and energy work and breath work and things that kind of can, if like meditation for me doesn't work though sometimes, then like my next step would be to go to breath work or tapping. EFT tapping is one of my favorite techniques, and it's free, and you can get them like amazing people that you can follow along with on YouTube. Brad Yates is one of my favorites. But I love tapping. I love a lot of reading and learning. It's just kind of like continuous learning and getting, closer to myself. But it's kind of like having tears, like, because there are some times where my like go-to mental health things just aren't going to cut it that day, and it's just not working. And so I just have things that I keep, more things I can reach for. But I think knowing that I'm going to be uncomfortable and being okay with uncomfortability was one of the most special things that came from that. Because I think that's where, when you can sit in your uncomfortability, I think that's where the magic happens. That's where the art can happen, not trying to run from it.
Yeah, that's a great point, that when people try to run from their, or ignore, right, pretend everything is okay, you said it, it creeps up and comes out in different ways, whether physical, in our health, in our mind, in our interactions, our relationships with others. There's so many ways, and especially to hear now that you have to go on flights. I'm just like, oh, how would you do it? Like, I just can't imagine.
I made myself fly the next week. I made myself fly alone the next week. And I was just like, I have to face this before it becomes a phobia. And I didn't know how I was going to be. I was so disconnected from my emotions. I didn't know if I was going to be fine or not. And I got on the plane and everything was okay. And then they messed up my seat, and I was supposed to be on an aisle seat. I was like very adamant that I booked an aisle seat so I could get out. And they messed me up and put me in a window seat. And then I was like offering people to, I was like, I'll pay you to switch. I cannot make this flight without this. The flight attendant, and she wasn't very nice, and we kind of got into it. And then it wound up being the most turbulent day of the year. And I was like trapped on this plane, walking up and down the aisle. I was like, I totally lost it. And that's when I was like, I'm not okay. Like, this is not okay. But at that point I was flying about every 2 weeks. So there was just no avoiding it. I just kept making myself face it. And I mean, I flew with Xanax for a little bit, but it didn't make it better. It just kind of made me tired and upset. Like, I would just kind of like lay there and cry until I got to my destination. But you got to do it.
When people go through trauma, there's a way to do it. And the more you resist the recreating that, but again, there's techniques and tools. And if you have support, if you have a mentor, if you have a therapist, someone to help you through it, it's better. But again, that's very brave of you. I just want to say, put that out there. That's so brave of you to continue. And
brave or naive. I didn't even have, like, in my support system, like a lot of my support system didn't have the emotional tools either. So I kind of, once I went on that discovery to find those things, I brought them back to my family, and like everyone grew. And from just my experience, all the people around me were able to like use that to grow, as I was like, wait, y'all were doing this wrong. Like, you're supposed to feel, you're supposed to talk about shitty things. Like, you're supposed to not feel good all the time. Like, everybody wake up. Like, it was like I was shoving self-help books down everybody's throat.
Right. Well, and I have a self-help book, if you notice, and this is crooked. I don't know what's going on with this.
Oh my gosh.
But it's Emotional Strength Explained. It's a self-help book that's easy for people, especially like beginners, someone who's gone through something, or if you're going through something and you don't know how to handle it. This is a journal. It helps people step by step and takes you through 30 days or so, where you learn what you need to get there, whether you need support or you need to do things different in your life. It helps you to commit and make those changes. So that's one of the things I always talk about on my show.
That's amazing.
That's one of the things I always talk about on my show. And as well, I have a series of books now for kids.
Oh my gosh.
The fun book is ages 5 to 7. And the next one is for the tween group. It's coming out soon. but it meets them at their level, and it helps them to understand their emotions, their feelings. It's a workbook they can use, kind of like a diary, but it really helps kids at that younger age. So for your example, by the time you hit 18, if you had gone through having some tools like books or being introduced to this, it would really would have helped you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is so amazing that you're creating that. I love that so much.
Yeah. So now, all right. So we've gone through this traumatic experience with you. We've gone through the creative process, and let's talk a little bit about what's happening now. So you have a new single out now called Bones. Bones.
Yes, Bones.
What can our listeners learn about that right now? Let's hear a little bit about.
Yeah. Bones is the part of the album. I call it the comic relief of the album, but it's this cannibal queen character who her response to this traumatic situation is to it's a take on the sirens from the Odyssey, and she calls in the planes to her island and eats the pilots because she is angry. And it's kind of the point where you're trauma bonding to people and kind of seeking out that red flag love. I think when we go through catastrophes, we can kind of become unhealthy people, and sometimes it can be really fun. And so this is the part where I was really trauma bonding to people and seeking out people that were not necessarily good for me, and in the process becoming a huge red flag person myself and breaking a lot of hearts and not really caring and just having a blast. And so the fun sonic nature of the song, it's a very upbeat and energetic song, but the lyrics are a little bit darker if you listen to the story of them. So this song is all about trauma bonding.
So this song then would be a good example of something that I read, which is that you give the audience immersive experiences and exceptional electro-infused pop that is groundbreaking and unique, right? So this is a good example of that. And I know that, a lot of our listeners are kind of in between that pop and that, there's a lot of new sounds coming out today. So it's just amazing. I want to congratulate you and thank you for putting yourself out there and your whole authentic self too, right? What is so purple is big in your life too, right?
It is.
What about the color purple? What can we learn from you with that?
Oh, purple. Purple is my whole life. Purple is what I live in service to. Purple is the color of creativity and transformation and uniqueness and boldness. It's the blending of the spectrums of blue and red, and it's the only non-spectral color. And so it sits in this very in-between place. And to me, it's like it's sitting in the unknown and being creative in that place. I think when I surround myself with purple, and I have since I was a kid, I've always felt never like it was necessarily like my quote unquote favorite color, but it was a color that I always surrounded myself with. And then once I started learning about it, I was like, oh, I understand why. It's also the color of the, upper chakra and the color of the resurrection, which is the meaning of my name. So I've always been very, very drawn to it. And I believe that everybody should live their life in service to its principles. So I call my fan communities called the Purple Cult, and we live our lives dedicated to the service of creativity and transformation.
Wonderful. Now, when people want to look you up and connect with you, you're online, obviously, right? Facebook, Instagram, Spotify. I know that you're available, the official Anastasia Elliott on Facebook, and then Anastasia Elliott on Instagram.
Yes.
Is there a better place other than, would you prefer one or the other? Where should people go to first get connected with you?
I love sending people to YouTube just because I am a very visual artist, and so when I make music, it's also it's this pairing the sound with the visual. So on YouTube, you can see the whole story and all the 5 parts that are out so far from the album, and you'll get to see all 13 soon. So. But Spotify, like any place you listen to music, and I'm probably most active as talking to people on Instagram. So basically follow me everywhere and you'll get different things no matter where you are. And I also have a private group on Facebook called The Purple Cult, where it's a community for creatives and artistic people to support each other and get inspired and share their art and connect with other creatives. So that's something new that I'm very excited about.
Well, that's perfect. We need that. We do.
We do.
There's a lot of, new. I was just speaking with an artist last night who was saying, wouldn't it be great if local cities would, play local artists in, different places around town or traveling or wherever. Like, it was such a nice novel concept, because it's true that if you're in your zone, right? You're in your own community and you have your connections. But then when you do reach out, if you're an artist and you're touring or you go, and that's kind of like a new thing, because the world today is different. My husband, who's a musician, he's at his band and he's going on tour back in old metalhead, this guy. But
oh, amazing.
Yeah, but it was a different world back then, right? You would get in the van and you'd head out over the road and you would just make your way and try to sell thousands of your CDs or whatever. And now it's different. Music is available at our fingertips, which is good, I think. Do you agree?
I have a lot of mixed feelings on this. I believe that the way that music is right now, and I think art in general, I think it's become very devalued, and I think it's because of the easy access that we have to it. I think it's lost a lot of what makes it special. And I mean, even just from the sheer sense that we get paid next to nothing for it, and artists, especially independent artists, I mean, you spend thousands and thousands and thousands to make an album, and you're getting pennies for it. And I think the culture of social media and Spotify, it's kind of created this instant gratification sense of fast food consumption with music, where you are having to break through so much noise. There's no gatekeeping. I mean, there's 60,000 songs uploaded to Spotify every single day. And as lovely as that is, it also just makes it so much noise that you have to break through. And having to care about things like algorithms, making algorithms happy and feeding people enough and making enough content. And I think for artists, it can get us very much in this mental space, like nothing we do is enough and nothing we could ever create is enough. And that's why I'm such a huge advocate for good self-care and mental health and having like toolboxes, because I think it's really, really hard to keep your self-worth turned up high when you're an artist right now. I think that the opportunities are low. I think all that we're kind of judged on is our vanity metrics, which a lot of them are not even true from a lot of artists' cases. They're purchased numbers. And, it's kind of, it doesn't matter how great your music or your art is right now. Most of the time, all that matters is your Spotify monthly listeners or your TikTok following. And it can just be very frustrating to create something that you really believe in or that you know is awesome, but you may not have a marketing brain, or you may not have the kind of brain to be a booker, or you may not. I mean, we're having to do so many roles that usually would have had a team. And I was actually at a panel the other day with a bunch of booking agents and artist developers, and they were talking about how even just to reach out to people to get, to ask them to listen to your music, they kind of look for 4 to 5 emails before they'll really click on your email, because they want to know that you're serious about your art. And it's like crazy. I was like, do you expect artists to keep like spreadsheets with like where we tick off how many times we followed up with you? It's really wild. I think the expectations right now that are put on artists, and then we see other artists that are like, getting certain things, and it's hard not to compare. Like, you really just have to stay grounded in yourself. That's like the best advice I can give anybody, is just to stay really grounded in what you're doing and try to put the blinders on.
You do. You have to have that balance. And, you're really hitting the nail on the head with everything you're saying. You're so on point. You have to run it like a business instead of like a creative endeavor, right? It's not, and it shouldn't be that way, right? You have a gift to give the world. You have, something that is, being blessed with a talent like that is just something that is so amazing, right? We all have different gifts, whatever, but the music is such an emotional tool in itself that the world is really fortunate to have. And when you can't get the following or the audience that you deserve because of this culture that we live in, it's really a shame. So, so listeners,
well, it becomes like no, go ahead.
I was just going to remind our listeners that if you're a musician out there, you're new entering the scene, or you've been out there a while, do listen to Anastasia's advice and stay grounded and be aware and know what's going on out there, but stay true to your origins and your authenticity, right? It's so important to balance it and not go too far on the side of how many followers am I getting? Am I gaining the traction? Right. Stay true and stay focused without losing your mental health in the process.
It's hard. I mean, I had gotten to a point in the last year that I was hardly writing music at all. And most of my time was spent figuring out how to run a great Facebook ad, or how to make automated email campaigns, or, doing all this, like learning about TikTok, which I'm still not very active on. And I just don't believe that a lot of the social media, like the ways that they like you to create, where it's posting so frequently, I don't believe that is how our creativity works. I think it's actually really in disservice to creativity. Creativity is not something that should be like on command. And so I think that it becomes stressful. But I had definitely had a long period where I was not creating music. I was not creating much at all. I was just trying to figure out, how the heck am I going to get this massive project that I've worked 10 years of my life on to the right audience? Like, how am I going to service them? And now I've gotten to the place where I'm just like, I started to be really depressed in my job, and I just started to be like, this is not why we do it. And like the shows that we would do would be like, this is why we do it. And it kind of goes back and forth between like, kind of mental breakdowns, being like, what is this, an industry now? And then, yes, this is why we do it. Getting to hear people sing your songs back, and getting to see the reactions when you release something and it means something to someone. So one of my favorite toolkit things for an artist is to create a positive comment vision board. I mean, it could apply really to anybody that has any kind of business, but I kind of have this document where anytime someone sends me a message or leaves a comment that like means something to me, or like shows me that my art connected with somebody, I take a screenshot of it and I put it in this document. And then when I'm feeling really crappy, or like I just am so over the BS of this business, I will go and read my positive comment vision board. And it kind of just like reconnects me to my why. I think staying connected to your why is like, it's everything.
That's a great idea. And, I've created vision boards. The first one I did was, I think, later than everybody else. It was probably like 2 years ago. And the first one was like an I am board. So it was reminders of myself and what I want to stay focused in, not to get sidetracked by those negative voices that we, that sometimes are there for us. And as a result of different interactions and that it was wonderful because it was like a starburst shape and the colors that I used were specific to me. And it was just wonderful. The second one I did was what I wanted in the coming year. And it's, I did the magazine clippings and the different things. And it's actually something that I keep and I do. I refer to that because regardless of whatever's going on out there in internet land, we still have to stay true and it helps us get through those days, right? Because no matter what we go through, we can still keep it simple and still stay focused. So in being resilient, I think that's one of the important things is to be open and flexible. Openness and flexibility is important. So each of us is different, right? Some people don't like writing, others love writing. Some people have music as a tool that they can perform and create. Others have, art as their method. But it's something that we always look at. And I love meeting with people like you who are, out there and you've really honed in on your craft and you're at that tipping point where you're about to release something big into the world and it's going to help, right? So the more we do it, so that's something that's very important.
I think what you said, being open and flexible, like that is what creates resilience in the first place, because it's really impossible to create resilience in yourself unless you've been through things that are really, really, really challenging and overcome it. Like you're not going to meet people that have much resilience if they haven't been through some stuff. And I always say the most interesting people you meet are usually the ones that have been through some pretty dark stuff. Like if you've got people that are just kind of like doing the same thing every day and they watch TV and that's all really they really do, they're not going to have much to talk about, not much life experience to draw from. And when people find me and tell me about all the hard things they're going through, I always just like remind them that that's great. It's amazing that you're going through hard things, because when you get on the other side of it and you can do something with it and your skin's a little thicker, like I think it's lovely. I've learned to not hate that. I call her the trauma fairy all the times that she's visited me. And now I'm like, all right, let's go. We're going to level up again, even though I'm going to absolutely hate this couple weeks or a couple of months or a year of my life. Like, cool. Like I'm here for it. Yeah. But I mean, I think it prepares you. Like all the crazy things I've been through, getting this album to this point have prepared me to be able to release it and to actually be able to have more than just an album to give the world. It has so much emotional weight to it. And I think as an artist, your job is emotion. That's your profession, mastering emotion and communicating emotion.
Yeah. So now, speaking of mastering emotion, you've said that you've attempted to take back your personal power, and you show that right through your songs. What do you think is, well, you've been through not only the plane crash, right, and during the creation of this album, what else have you been through where you had to take back your personal power, and how did you do it?
Yeah, after my plane crash, I was signed to the president of Warner Brothers Records, and we wound up making this album together, but it was just the dream label situation where he was like, make your dream record, A&R your own project. I don't want to know what songs you pick. I just want you to turn in the most Anastasia record. Like, go make it. And same with, anything I created while I was there. But we were a few weeks away from beginning the release, and I was caught in a lovely music industry regime change. And they got a new CEO, and my president wound up leaving, and they fired most of my team. And so I asked out of my deal and wound up getting ownership of all of my content, which was so rare and so amazing, but also incredibly hard because I then had all this amazing work that was everything I wanted it to be, and no marketing help and no clue how to put it out into the world. And so it kind of began my journey to build a good independent team. And then back up just a little bit, right after I actually recorded the album, so I guess this would be right before I actually lost the deal, I was allergic to the spice thyme for a brief period, which is really funny to me. I was like, time is the enemy was always my saying. But I was allergic to thyme and I ate some. And one of my symptoms was that I would get a hoarse voice. And I don't know if it was because I kept talking on it or what, but I wound up having to have vocal surgery because a blood vessel got inflamed in my vocal cords and wouldn't go away. And so I wound up traveling like all over the country to the best vocal doctors in the world, and ended up in Boston for my surgery. But I had to be completely silent for 75 days. No talking, no whispering, no mouthing words. I even learned how to control and stop my sneezes and coughs. It's rare that I will sneeze or cough now. It was truly wild, but that for me was like the biggest, like wrestling with my identity and the potential loss of everything that I thought made me me, because I was such a singer. That was everything. That was my whole identity. There was nothing else. And when that was taken from me, especially after recording my dream album and never knowing if I'd be able to tour it or if I was going to get my real voice back, because what happened to me, I'm a soprano, and when I would try to sing high, there was just no sound. Like my cords couldn't close completely because of that blood vessel. And so I wound up in that time, I had this like big vision where I was like, oh, I'm going to do this art project called 75 Days of Silence. And I'm just going to like learn other mediums of art. And I'm going to like see what happens if my voice is taken away and I still express myself through other things. And I was like, okay, I'm going to make this good. But I was just so depressed. That was not happening. But I did wind up, I got trained in henna, which I actually still do now. Like there were things that I kind of picked up just trying to stay creative and to not, let myself completely tank. But then when my voice is better than ever, and he crushed the surgery, but I still to this day, because of that situation, I have a way different relationship with my voice. I mean, of course, plenty of PTSD came along with that. And even still to this day, singing live is my favorite thing, but it took years of me having to, kind of talk myself off the ledge of, I'm going to injure myself, even though I didn't hurt myself singing in the first place. So I'm so crazy protective of my voice, but it also made me a smarter singer. It made me, have a closer relationship with my voice and also expand my identity, because during that time I had to think about if this never comes back, I didn't even want to be alive if it didn't come back. I was like, what is my life? What is life even going to be? It's kind of like when you're playing a video game and you haven't unlocked certain levels, but you can see that they're there. That's what life would have felt like to me. I know what's there and I can't ever do it again. I couldn't imagine what that was going to be like. So it made me have to kind of expand who I was. And I think taking that pressure off of my whole identity being singer wound up making me a better singer and a better artist, and appreciate it in a different way. So that was blow number one. I guess losing the deal was blow number two. And then through this whole time, I had trauma bonded. Bones is about. I had trauma bonded to my partner at the time, and he had a kid that I wound up raising for 8 years of his life. I wound up helping to raise, and that relationship wound up growing into something very emotionally abusive. And so that was, I wound up leaving my engagement middle of COVID. So we had just started releasing the first songs for this album right before COVID. And I had been like, all right, I'm finally going to do this. Like, I got my little bitty independent team, like, let's go. And we had just started touring. And then COVID happened and we had to like cancel a lot of dates. And I pulled back on releasing the album because I was like, I can't have worked on this for so many years of my life and I can't even play shows. Like, I can't do that. So we wound up holding it back. And then there was an investor that came into the picture that we worked with for 9 months to make a deal. And then that wound up falling through. It's like, it was just like heartbreak after heartbreak. And just being like, no, I know that this is destined for greatness. And I don't care how long it's going to take to find its right team and its right place. I'm not going to give up on it because there's no choice to me. Like, doing this as my life has never been there's no plan B for me. Like, this is what I do. And if I don't do this, like, I don't want to do anything else. So resilience has been something I've built a lot of because it's hard to go through a lot of stuff like that and go through so many heartbreaks and still be like, I'm so passionate about this music. It's going to happen. And I still very much believe that it's going to happen. And now I'm writing the next 2 albums and that's helped me to like release this first one and to be okay with letting it go, because for a long time it's been so much fear in putting this album out because it's got so much expectation from me on it. It's my 10-year-old baby. I mean, it's like giving birth to a 10-year-old child that I'm just like, I know it and I love it so much. And I hope that the world receives it the way that I hope they do. And in having an independent budget, not being able to reach as many people as I would love to. And that's why I'm so grateful to have opportunities like this, to be on this show with you and hopefully connect with your listeners and maybe they'll, love my art and it'll help them. That's my rambling of my last 8 years of resilient experiences.
Yeah. So, well, it is, your life is a masterpiece, right? So, and I think I love something that I read about you, that you have the whole world or nothing mentality, right? So you're all in, and the fact that you've taken such good care of this to make it as best as it can be for the listeners and for your audience, I think it's going to get there. And you have new projects you're starting, and to to understand that sometimes we have to take something through to the end and see it through to then get on to the next phase of life. That's just amazing. So one of the things though that you kind of glossed over was that you were able to get past an abusive trauma-based relationship. Now, that's a touchy subject, so I hope you don't mind I'm asking about it.
I'm an open book.
Thank you. And our listeners will thank you, too. One of the things that people who have been in trauma, sometimes they, like you said, it changes you. And, like you were in something and you stayed in it, and you probably found value there, taking care of the child, being of value. Now that you're past that, what are your views on that? And what advice can you give to someone who might be in a relationship that's toxic or abusive? What can you share?
Well, I think for me, it was hard to leave because there was a lot of greatness in the relationship. And I think it was really hard for me to see how bad it was. And I think it was a kind of like a slow progression, kind of like a frog boiling in water. Like, you don't really know that it's as bad as it is until it's like, oh God. And then you like look back at it and you're like, what was I thinking? Like, what was I doing? And that's kind of what happened to me. Like, it was a lot of addiction based stuff that I was dealing with, but I didn't always see it like that in him. And it was more sexual obsession type stuff. So it was a lot of harassing me a lot for things that were crossing my boundaries. And really 5 years of fending that off like almost daily. And it just became this thing that like, I don't give up on things. And I just was like, it can change, it can change, it can change. And I didn't really see it clearly. And I should have known. I didn't tell my friends any of this was going on. I mean, even my closest friends, nobody knew about it. And that to me was like a big, big, big red flag that I wound up seeing later because I knew what they would say. I knew what they would think. It was just very subconscious, stuff. And like, I got to the point where I was like, I think holding everything up, like scaffolding in my brain, like just trying to hold everything up, that I lost a lot of touch with my own inner voice. And I used to, or I still do, I write stream of conscious every morning, 3 pages and journaling. And when I wound up having an experience during COVID that kind of woke me up to what was happening. And I went back and I read my journals over the past like 3 years and saw in my own voice that every morning I was writing things like, I'm so miserable. I feel so dark. I feel so like upset. Like, what can I do today to change this? What can I do today to like make this stop? Or what can I, I was just writing all of these like awful things. And then I would like close my journal with something like, all right, let's go have a good day. And I would just like basically dump my sadness in the journal and then just be like, all right, now I'm going to slap on that face. And I think a lot of that comes from my upbringing of that, like, things are always perfect kind of mentality. Like I was able to compartmentalize it in the worst way. And then once I read that though, and I had to almost start thinking of it like I was watching someone in a movie, and I just started having to act without really attaching to the actions. And I would be like, what if I was watching somebody going through this in a movie, or if one of my best friends came to me and said, this is what's going on, I would move her out that night. I would tell that girl, run the hell away. What are you doing? And I couldn't see that for myself, though. Even in those moments where I could see if this was a friend, I would tell her to run. Then when I would still try to think about it as myself, I would start making excuses for it. And I'd be like, oh, it can get, and I was like, And so I just had to start acting and not thinking about it, because I knew that I was in a place where I just couldn't really process it right at the time. And so I was just making the actions that were so uncomfortable and bombing my life, basically, like everything that I had. And in that, I lost my business partner. I lost my child. Like I lost everything that was my life. And it was really, really, really shitty. And the best thing I could have done for myself in the long run.
And it's, you said something that a lot of women go through when they're in it, right? They say it can get better. They have that hope and belief, and they want to even think that they can handle it, right? It's okay, or it won't happen again, or if we change something, it'll get better, and maybe it does for a while. But it's a thing where you have to process it in your own way and have support to, to leave it, right? Because there are relationships when you put that time in, you don't want to give it up because it's like fear of the unknown. But it's interesting that you said you were journaling that whole time, and when you look back, that was your true feeling. So, but it took time, I'm sure, to connect with that
Absolutely.
true feeling.
Because
right
when you ignore that, and when you ignore your voice for so long, it kind of stops talking to you. And I saw it in just like my creativity not being as fluid, and like not having as easy access to my voice. And I think for someone like me I'm a highly sensitive person, I'm a feeler, and even when people are not very nice or they're struggling with stuff, it's hard for me to not find the best parts of them and try to bring that out. Like I love helping people, and I love, I don't think anyone is inherently bad. I could always be like, oh, this is happening because they've been through this, and this is the trauma that they bring to the table, and having to stop that behavior in myself and be like, no, sometimes I agree, people are not just inherently bad, but that doesn't mean that they have to be my problem. And they can fix their own stuff. And sometimes people are just not healed enough to be in my life. And that's just I wish them the best, and I can be there for them at a distance. But I used to be like the collector of, I think, broken souls. And because I understood them and I related to them in a lot of ways, and I still do. I love collecting my little broken souls. But in order to do that and do it in a place where you don't lose yourself in the process, it requires so much work, which I'm now, I think, in a place to do. So that's why I'm happy that this album is coming out now, because I think my goal is to find people that are struggling and feeling a little broken. And I now feel like I have a way better space to hold for them than maybe I would have if I had released it 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah. And, as empaths, right, people who feel each other, feel other people more than everyone else, it's important to be able to set those boundaries and, even to learn that boundaries are healthy, right? A lot of us, how many years did we go not knowing that it's okay to say no? And that is one of the most important things that I've learned and that I tell my clients, because it starts that path of self-respect and giving back to get what you deserve. And it's so wild. Like, Anastasia, I read that you are now about finding outlets that allow you to stay open and inspired, that prevent you from ever becoming stuck. I think that's amazing. And that kind of is intertwined with this story and your experiences, how you got back to a good place from being in those wrong places, right?
I think that's the promise that I've made to myself, is to always, if I'm ever feeling like my voice is not coming to me as easily, like my words are not as easy, or like I'm feeling trapped in any way, or I'm not telling my friends things, like I have kind of like, I know my own red flags, and I think I've put people in my life that keep me accountable and that I'm honest with, especially my best friend. Like, I tell her absolutely everything, and I trust her, and I I'm able to kind of mirror sometimes, like when I go into those places or patterns that I know of my own, if I can put them on her, I can kind of, my therapist calls it mirroring, where you're kind of, or reality testing. I had to do a lot of that when I left that relationship, because I was kind of redefining what was like okay and what was not okay for me. And I reality test a lot with her. Like, I'll tell her things and see her reaction. And then that kind of helps me to, like, sort through things sometimes. I think surrounding yourself with people that are healthy and in a good place, like people that are doing things you want to be doing, or that are excited about their lives, or, having great things. Like, for a long time, a lot of my friends, I felt like we would just get together and it would just be like, this is going wrong and this is hard and you just keep yourself in that kind of bad, sticky energy. And I've really made a point this past year to surround myself with more people that are doing things in life and are trying to work on themselves and are happy. Because if you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, like, I took a hard look at the 5 people I was spending the most time with.
That's great. That's a great way to get to that point, because it's so true. People, today, especially coming out of the COVID pandemic and the isolation or redefining your life, it's important that people do that, to define what it is. If you're feeling trapped, if you're feeling unsure, if you can be more aware of your own red flags and those triggers that will pop up, causing a behavior, causing a lack of a behavior. It's so important to have that trusted support. Like you mentioned, doing that mirroring is something that can really redefine your life. And one of the things also, in my book is redefining what's healthy. So you
Mm-hmm.
know, those who are close to you, your family or your friends, may not be good for you, only you don't see it because they're your support and they're your family or they're your best friend, but you don't realize that that's really not going to help you. So it's important to listen to your intuition, right? Stay true to what you can achieve. And that's one of the most important things, is like rising up to a higher energy, right? Be
Mm-hmm.
aware of what that low energy looks like and that negative space. One tip I can share with everyone is, when you have a negative thought, whether it's about yourself or a situation, even if it's a true fact, replace that negative thought with 3 positive ones.
Mm.
That's something that can easily help reframe your mind. Even if you're going through anxiety, you're feeling anxious, it's so simple. If you and Anastasia, try that next time you're
Yeah,
flying.
absolutely.
It
Yeah.
that, and smiling actually
Smiling,
changes
yes.
the brain chemicals. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, it
There's
sounds
another one that
silly.
I have too that then I'll share that really helped me both during that time, and also I do it every day now. But I do this thing in the morning where I will first talk about, like, I do it in my voice recorder, and I'll talk about things that I'm grateful for like, a good 30 seconds till I run out of things. And then I'll talk about my ideal day, like how the day is going to go, but I talk about it in the past tense, and I talk about it being like as if it were the end of the day. I talk about my day being great and all the things that I wanted to see happen in that day, and how I moved through the day and how I showed up for certain people. And then I talk about, the last piece is talking about um, my future self. Sometimes it'll be a year, sometimes it'll be 5 years, whatever I'm feeling that day, in the past tense. And I'll talk about having basically achieved or succeeded in certain things. And I really connect with that energy. And I'll also do visualization meditations where I'll just sit there sometimes, or write. It can be visual or writing, where I think about, like, okay, my ideal self, like, what does she look like? Like, what does, like, the person that I'm trying to become, or like the person I want to see in 5 years in myself, like, what does she wear? Who are her friends? What kind of stuff does she do? What kind of self-care practices does she have? Like, how does she approach songwriting? Like, what kind of excitement does she bring to the table? What do her boundaries look like? Because I think sometimes when we're in places where it's hard for us to see it for ourselves, kind of making ourselves into a character in our heads, it can help align you with the energy, because then when you can see yourself doing those things, it makes it more real, I think, in some ways. And it helps me bring that energy into my life. Like, even if I wake up one day and I'm like having a crappy day and I've got to go into an interview or a session or something, I'll be like, all right, like, how would best self Anastasia approach this? Like, even if that's canceling the session and, just taking care of myself for the night, like, whatever that is. I don't know. That's something that has become one of my most important things in my toolkit, I think, because around after the plane crash, when I was in that more abusive relationship, I was doing a lot of things that I think appeared on the outside like self-care, but I was really just over functioning and being militant with my routines. And, like, I think it kind of swung me, like, into the, like, not self-care, and beating myself up if I didn't hit all my routine points, or and then after my engagement broke off, I kind of swung to the other direction, and I started just having a lot of fun. And I think the last year has been like finding my middle, like, and having more fluid routines, or just my routine just being, what do I need this morning? Like, is it a workout? Is it to meditate? Is it both? Is it journaling? Is it to eat pancakes? Like, what does self-care look like for me today?
Yeah. And, that ties into our culture of the social media, the instant gratification, constantly having to be on and be doing and be busy and be something that maybe we're not,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so important that you mention that, like, identifying what it is that's going to be good for your best self, and then doing that for now, because it's true. It's so easy. We can get engaged in something like before we realize like, wait, this is too much. This isn't actually helping us, and, you're a musician. I'm a transitional wellness coach and a life coach and a career coach and a bunch of other things. But it's true that we're not only our roles, right? We're all human. And in this life, it's so important to take the time we need in order to be better. And then we can really shine in those areas that matter. Now, Anastasia, one thing that I want to ask you about too is you've had a lot of public speaking engagements, and you've done some other things. Let's see, you have hosted your own panel at National Association of Music Merchants on the future of technology for musicians, right? You have done a benefit show for families with the victims of the Walmart massacre from El Paso, Texas. You've done speaking engagements with high schools, colleges, corporations on healing trauma and mental illness as well. That's just amazing. Are you available for those types of things now?
Absolutely, and I would love to do more. I haven't really gotten to do enough since COVID, but a lot of those things were pre-COVID, and I missed it a lot. I think it's one of my favorite things that I can do, but yeah, I would love to do more of it. So if you know any places to send me there.
Okay, yeah, definitely. The public speaking is the best way. You can reach groups, you can address them. There's a lot of things going on for women, especially. And so it's one of the things I think with your experience and the trauma and now this focus on resiliency and mental health, you're really going to make a difference in the world between that and your new music. We can't wait. Do you think that I just have one more question for you. Yeah. Do you think that your next musical projects are going to be more uplifting, or are they still going to be as eclectic or unique? I don't know. How do you feel about? Can you give us some insight into that?
Yeah, I think my love for theatrics. I don't think that completely uplifting will ever be my my shtick. I think I live in both the darkness and the uplifting so much that I think even my uplifting stuff has depth. And there are a lot of, I think, uplifting feeling songs on this first album, but they're rooted in something deeper. And I don't think that for me, I can really create things without that. But the next EP, we actually just picked the songs for it. And there are songs on there that feel, I think, uplifting. But we are going a little heavier into rock, so I don't know. But then the third album couldn't be farther from uplifting. It's a darker concept album that we're writing right now, and it's funny because the concept came to me the day that I decided first album was going to be released. It was like the next one just like dropped in for me. And I really can't say where it came from. It just hit me and I was like, that's the next album. And it's going to be a very different type of album, like not one that you see. The structure of it is going to be very different than your typical album. So it's going to be a feat. It's going to be a feat to create, but we're excited.
Good. Well, it's going to keep you rooted and keep you in that space that you're intended for. So, yes. Anastasia, I wish you the best of luck in the creation of that third, next and third album. I want to give you, props for the songs that you've released so far. Bones. We have one called Cigarettes and Gasoline, Crash Landing, London and Masquerade. So, listeners, if you're out there, go out, check her out on Spotify. And, of course, don't forget her Instagram, Anastasia Elliott, as well as Facebook, original Anastasia Elliott, and YouTube. You'll get to see both the visual as well as the musical that goes with it. So, listeners, check Anastasia Elliott out now, and look for her new release coming out soon. Anastasia, thank you so much for being with us here on Power 98.5.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
To go on when there's nothing left but following the light. And then without a warning, I hear the sirens calling. Look up, we're falling from the sky.